Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to do things a little differently today. This won't be a first time reaction. I've listened to this song a few times already. It's captivated me. Something about it just sticks with me, and I haven't quite figured out what that is or why I can't shake it. I'm kind of hoping that after we listen to it together and I give my thoughts on it, maybe somebody in the comments will be able to give me their perspective on it that kind of shines a bit of a light on something that I'm missing. I also want to thank everyone that's here right now um, for showing up to this video. I know that if it isn't a popular band, there's not a lot of views. So if you clicked on this one, I appreciate it. We're going to check out something from the Cinema Alone, and not just any something, it's their debut single. We're going to be looking at the song I Don't Talk to Your Son Anymore. Let's dive in.
Eyes bright, arms wide, to the side of it all. Take your picture off its place on the wall. Like I once knew some soldier fell in a war, and not some close.
Love that little uplift on the guitar.
I can't keep any more.
Using the left guitar over here to fill in some of the space between the vocal bits. Taking that first verse and really expanding it here with extra vocal and instrumental layers. A lone violin note at the top. Much like how the second verse expands on the first, we have an expanded chorus here. a smooth way that comes back in with the slow rundown of the chord. All right. I'm a huge fan of the pacing of this. We're going to start with some of the stuff that I can vocalize that I enjoy in this, and then I don't know, we'll see if I can come into any new conclusions about it simply by being put on the spot and, talking about the ways that this song makes me feel. Because honestly, I don't have anyone to like share this stuff with other than, y'all. So when I listen to music, a lot of it is just thoughts to myself. I don't say them. And sometimes saying words gives them power. It opens up new, I don't know, synapse connections in the mind and allows you to figure stuff out you couldn't otherwise. So, I don't know. Like I said, let's start with what I do know. I love the pacing of this. I love the flow of it. We kick the song off with something that feels very anathema to me. It's light, it's smooth, but it's also dark. And I love this sort of complexion between like rigid atmospheric texture with a smooth, silky delivery. I think that's the best way I want to describe it. That combination of jagged and smooth together, of dark but comfortable, it's such a great way to start this track, especially seeing where it evolves into. The simple guitar line just kind of gives us the nice chord outlining going on, the almost catchy vocal work going on too, the very light drum work here, just enough to keep the song pushing forward. We spend a bit of time in this, and then it opens up just a little bit. The drums get a little bit more excitable, a little bit more energy. See some cymbals show up a little bit more. The guitar moves from this sort of dreary, lighter chord shaping into full chord strums. And we also shift away from a darker, moodier vibe into something a bit more positive and semi-celebratory. There's still an inkling of darkness injected into the middle of it. It's not some sappy pop song right here, but it does bring a lot of positive energy, both in the guitar chord here, but also in the vocal delivery. We have a brighter, higher range sound coming out of this. This already right here is a fantastic start, but then we pull back to the second verse, which takes all of the foundational ideas from that first verse and layers them up. More guitars, bringing in more moody elements, more vocals coming together to create something very cacophonous, something of multitudes. Whatever's being said here isn't said by just one person anymore. It's many. That feels powerful. I think part of it too is that it's not just a type of like backtracking where we will, or backing track, where we have one vocalist, do harmonies with themselves or just sing the same part multiple times in order to widen out the sound. All of these have different timing to them. All of them have different pitches, not necessarily in a calculated harmonic kind of way. It feels like a group of people here. That has a very different feeling from traditional ways of layering the same vocalist. Like I mentioned, multitudes. It feels like a crowd. And when we pair that with the expanded drum parts, with the multiple guitar parts showing up here, it feels excitable. It feels ready to go somewhere. It also feels like it's driving a point home. It's not just one person saying these words anymore. Like the first verse, it's now many. I mentioned the term cacophonous, a conglomeration of sounds. I think the next section takes this into a very interesting direction. This was with the distorted vocals and the new tom heavy drum part. This is the part of the song that I feel I get lost in most often. We can see a steady growth from verse 1 to chorus 1 to verse 2, or at least the first half of verse 2 into chorus 2. But there's this part between that group part of verse 2 and the return to the chorus. The energy comes down in some ways. We remove a lot of the layers. We focus just on toms, not a lot of cymbal work. The guitar work is a bit lighter here. The vocals are sparse and seemingly random. I can never quite catch the phrasing or how the vocals work within the rhythmic trappings of the drums. It all seems to clash in a way that the rest of the song doesn't. It's all very congruent everywhere else. It starts to line up at about 75% of the way into it. I never figure out why. Even on this listen, I'm paying so much attention to the interplay between the vocal rhythms and the drums, and I don't see the point when they start to get less blurry, when they become a bit more focused and working together a bit more. It just sort of happens at a point. I wish I had a better interpretation of this part. It's the thing that sort of slips through my fingertips, and at times I've wondered if this is the key to fully unlocking why this song sticks with me the way it does. Not only do we have the interesting phrasing between the vocals and the drums, but we also have the distortion on the vocals. It's kind of tough to make out what's being said. I wonder if I would be able to understand the words without them on the screen. And maybe that's not even the point of it, anyways. Maybe the purpose is obfuscation. Maybe it is to hide information. Maybe the purpose is to create something that feels like it clashes with that around it. Regardless, it ends in something that does make sense to me. There is a rising delivery of nothing left to say or something along those lines. And it gets more and more, I don't know if unhinged is the word, but emotionally delivered. The first time through, it sounds like it might even just be spoken with a little bit of a sing-songiness to it, a bit of a rhythm and cadence, but not necessarily an intentional pitch to it. But by the third time around, it almost sounds like the vocalist is screaming. There is pain to this that I think is additionally conveyed and amplified by the distortion. And by the last time, which might actually be the third. I can't remember if there's 3 or 4 times through on that. Regardless, the last time is this big explosive moment. And there is, oddly enough, a single note violin that exists right before that final delivery. It just kind of gets held out above the rest of the music. It's an interesting detail to add, I think. We'll come back around to that, though, if I can figure out why I think it's important other than simply its inclusion, because I don't hear that violin anywhere else. But this final scream pulls us back into the verse and it opens up the sound so much. We bring back that brightness. that the chorus already did for us the first time through. Except now we have, again, more layers, bigger sounds, more vocals. It's this big, bombastic, very almost celebratory sound here. I love this. The ebb and flow throughout this entire song to get to this point. We don't get here easily. We don't get here quickly, but the journey is well worth it. And then here we come to the ending, and I love the transition into this a little bit of a fade out, a little bit of a trailing of all of that high energy. It stops abruptly. We have a little bit of that reverb left, and then this smooth transition as the guitar slowly strums across the chord, kind of bringing in a hazy feeling, even almost as if all of that was a sort of like a daydream, and we are returning back to reality, sort of snapping back awake and realizing this is where we are again, back into this moody, isolated feeling, just the guitar, drums, and vocals. Back to that first verse. We've come full circle, but it really wasn't much of a circle in the sense of rising and then falling back down. We've just escalated to a point when it was unattainable to continue this growth, and it sort of collapses under its own weight. The song just abruptly stops, and we're snapped back to the beginning, the simplicity of it, the moodiness, the dreariness of it. This whole journey is just gorgeous. And I love the shifting in mood too. Constantly jumping back and forth between sadder, moodier, angstier sounds and more positive, uplifting, and even celebratory at times. The song tries to find the midpoint between these two extremes, and I don't necessarily think it ever does. It just swings wildly between them. I think it's what makes all of the details even more interesting. In the first chorus, it almost sounds like there's some slight, quiet wailing off to the left, way in the background. We do have the vocals, they come in, and then there's a pause, and then there's this cool guitar thing going off on the left, too. Sort of a conversation, a call and response here between the vocals and the guitar, but I also hear this distant, I don't know. If you could imagine hearing the reverberant echo of a yell from a distance away, never really hearing the original source, just kind of catching the last few moments of the trailing sound that's bouncing around the area. That's sort of what it feels like to me, catching the ghosts of 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 emotion. Never really seeing the origin point, never seeing the source, but getting this after image of it. It's the violin that shows up for a single note at the end of that second verse. It's the little guitar licks at the beginning of the second verse, the big, multi-layered section with the group vocals there. I'd even say that the dual guitars that we get in the outro, little things like that, pretty much playing the same thing, but just slightly out of sync, just enough to allow you to feel the duality that's going on there. I don't know that any of this would stand out as much if the song wasn't already evocative with its pacing, if it wasn't already creating impressive imagery. with its writing. It allows these moments of embellishment to stand out more so. I'm already enthralled with the music, and then you're putting more on top? What could that mean? Why is that there? It's what draws me in more and more on every listen is hearing more of these little details. I think to wrap this up before we dive into some lyrics on this, I enjoy the sort of bridge into prog rock that this is. There's a lot of what I would say are indie rock elements to it. And I've already mentioned Anathema, which is kind of prog rocky already, but I think there's a lot of palatable sounds to this with an overall gritty, mid fidelity production to it that gives it that indie rock flair. But when I look at the general growth of this, when I look at the instrumentation on display, when I look at some of the more unique decisions in the song, when I see that no section is really content with being what it was before, that there is this element of constant growth, other than the ending being so similar to the beginning, everything else is about taking what we've heard and building off of it, building something greater, building something larger, never content with returning to what we once were, always building to something better, larger, more cohesive, more authentic. It's all of this that reminds me of what prog rock is. Well, I suppose I should say what progressive rock is. Prog rock to me is still very much a specific sound of the 70s, and while I know that many of the bands were doing their own thing, it all sort of falls under an umbrella, for me, anyways. And when I hear bands try to copy that or are influenced by that, that's retro revival right there. But progressive rock is about taking the sounds of rock and pushing it in a new direction, about seeing where you can take it. I I like that about this track. It surprises me at times. Not so much anymore. I've heard the song plenty of times that I can anticipate everything going on, but the first time through it was a lot of twists and turns I wasn't expecting. And while everything does generally fit into sort of this indie rock vibe in general, with a little dash of pop music, or I suppose pop rock thrown in there, a certain palatability, particularly to some of the melody writing, there's also a lot of risks taken in this that, to me, feel authentic to the artist. And I like that. It's a stark reminder that even today there's new, fresh things happening in the rock scene. I'm going to take a moment here to read the lyrics. I haven't had a lot of luck with that in the past, but we'll see if I can't come to any new conclusions here. And then we're going to wrap the video up. Alright, I don't have a strong grasp on the lyrics, but we're going to go over it anyways, because that's what we do here. And hopefully, maybe some of you might catch some details I missed. We have two choruses split up into two stanzas each that, for the most part, all follow a specific pattern. It says, eyes bright, arms wide, to the sight of it all. I love this. Eyes bright, just like completely open, and arms wide, ready to accept the sight of all of this. It says, but take your picture off its place on the wall. Like I once knew some soldier felled in a war, and not some closed book I can't keep anymore. I read this as if it's somebody who this person doesn't feel as close to anymore. That says, I'm going to take your picture off the wall, right? We put pictures on the wall of those who are dear to us, family, friends, stuff like that. He says, it's like I once knew a soldier felled in a war and not some closed book I can't keep anymore. So it seems like what they're saying is that the person now is a closed book. They don't feel that they are privy to their life anymore. It doesn't feel like they are open and honest with the narrator anymore. He says, I can't keep this book anymore. It's time for this book to move on to its next owner, or to be returned to a library or something like that. It's just not mine anymore. This friendship isn't mine anymore. And so it's like a memory of a soldier that was felled in a war, someone you once knew. They are not that person anymore, though. He says, in my world, I am all of the deaths. That is one of the more powerful lines I've read that I don't quite get, but that I can feel. It's just one of those words that conveys an idea so well. But like lyrically, I guess linguistically, I don't get. But like in my gut, yeah, it's like all the failures, all of the pain, I am all of it, which makes sense. I am a person, as most people are, who is a product of their past, their failings, their shortcomings, and their successes. He says, in an open hand over on my chest, I hold that wound so unexpectedly dear, like old love letters to a better few years. I think that's interesting. Having a wound now that reminds you of a better past and clutching to the pain of this wound, which should be bad memories. It should be painful to remember the wound. Maybe it's a scar now, but it reminds you of before it happened, when things were better. The second verse says, eyes bright, arms wide, to the fear of your call. I know it's coming at some funeral. So count your days left like some green on a ring, some interstate love by strong arming. This goes over my head mostly. The idea of knowing that there's not a lot of time left, the funeral could be a metaphor for maybe the end of this relationship. I'm not sure what the idea of a green on a ring is. Counting your days left like green on a ring. I don't know. And then scent interstate, love by strong arming. Love by strong arming makes sense to me in isolation, but I don't really get that concept against everything else that's going on here. But then we get to the distorted vocal part, and it says, I was better at the words, you at a glide. So I don't know what a glide is though. I've never, I was better at words, you were better at a glide. Yeah, I don't, that word doesn't mean something that can fit in that word to me, anyways. It could be a cultural thing. I don't know. It says, I find there aren't phrases or movements for the children we leave behind. I like that line too. I don't think it's necessarily about literal children being left behind, but about growing up. That there's no way we can really talk about what's lost, what gets left behind as we grow and mature, hopefully mature, and become adults. What gets lost along the way, it's difficult to talk about that, especially if you don't know what was lost. And as I mentioned, the end of this section just says there's nothing to say over and over and over. So, what I get out of most of this is that these two people were originally pretty close, and through the years of growing up, they've distanced to a point where they're not really close friends anymore. And the narrator feels a bit saddened about this. Then the chorus kicks in, and it's just, you're my best friend forever. And the only way I can reconcile this is that it's the mixed feelings of it. That no matter how distant you might get from me, you will still always be my best friend. You will always have that place in my heart for those better few years behind us, as stated in the second stanza of the first verse. And it's that mixed feeling of losing someone that means the world to you and knowing that they're not the same person they were, but that you can't completely give up the person that they were either. You can't forget about that. You can't lose those memories. That person will always be dear to you. And the mixed feeling of that, the falling out, but the good days too. I think the song does a great job of capturing the positive and the negative, celebrating that which deserves to have been celebrated and remembered fondly, while also recognizing the current situation and how that makes you feel too. I mean, the entire opening of this track is rather somber and heavy. It's moody. The line there says, I'm taking your picture off the wall. You're not the person you were before. I don't really know who you are anymore. The chorus, bringing a bit of uplift to the song. Like I mentioned, a little bit more celebratory. You're my best friend forever. And I think the song does a great job of trying to find how these two ideas can coexist in one's mind and never really hitting the point where they do. You know, the song musically never hits a point where we find this bittersweet compilation. The two of these ideas never gel. We either get one or the other. Lyrically, we're kind of leading in that direction too. I don't get every single line, but I do feel that I have a stronger grasp of this now, having spoken through all of this. If you're still here, again, I appreciate it. I love sharing music that sticks with me, and I don't get an opportunity to do that too often. And I know this is a small artist, so I don't expect this video to do large numbers, but I hope that maybe you have found something you're interested in as well, and will keep an eye on the cinema alone, just like I am. These are my thoughts on I Don't Talk to Your Son Anymore by the cinema alone. Let me know what you thought of it. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on, maybe if you just have your own thoughts, opinions, or perspective on it, put all of that, as well as any other thoughts you might have, down into the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more there. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. Also, as usual with these smaller artists, I will be putting links to all of their stuff in the description. If you enjoyed this, go over to their channels, their social medias, their whatever. Show them some love from the Critical Reactions community. I'd greatly appreciate it. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.